All right, well, welcome everyone. This morning I have the great pleasure to be with Dr. Tia Trivisonno, who is an amazing lady, person, whatever you want to say, and in addition to being an amazing doctor and practitioner, and feel very fortunate. She practices in Long Island, New York. She's an acupuncturist, energy healer, all kind of things. So I'll kind of let her, also the head of the New York Naturopathic Association, which is working to get recognition. About half the states, I believe, don't recognize naturopaths. The one I live in, Tennessee, does not either. And it's a shame because it's a much more sensible and grounded profession. So we're going to here to talk about some really cool ways that naturopaths approach healing, and kind of tie that into the SolaraGem and the crystal fusion light, but just in general, just pick Tia's brain with all her wisdom. So Tia, thank you for coming and join us today.
Absolutely, Mike. It's such a pleasure to see you, and thank you for having me.
Oh, the pleasure's all mine. It's always a treat. So why don't we talk about that? Let's kind of jump in. As a naturopath, you have a different approach to healing work, and let's kind of talk about that. Just kind of give us some background on that, if you would.
Absolutely. So naturopathic medicine is a little bit different than a lot of the other branches of medicine. Naturopathic doctors are trained as primary care physicians. We do go through sort of a rigorous education, all of the biomedical sciences and clinical rotations, and we do sit for board exams. The nature of naturopathic medicine is different from the sense that we really follow a set of core principles that are aimed at prevention, getting to the root cause of illness, removing any obstacles to cure, really seeing the doctor as teacher, and believing in this vital force or the body's ability to heal itself, which kind of follows the natural process that we see in the external world, that nature itself has kind of a self-cleansing, self-healing, self-regulating force behind it, and that the human body is very similar to that. So rather than beginning with these types of invasive treatment modalities, naturopathic medicine is aimed at lifestyle interventions and, diet, nutrition, exercise, sleep hygiene, going through all these really important things that look at the body very holistically in order to use the least invasive treatment modalities first, and ultimately come to the most invasive things as a last resort, or if someone is in such an acute or severe condition that they may need something like that. So rather than jumping to a medication with a toxic side effect, we are looking at all of the underlying causes of illness and disease and really trying to set the system right, looking at the human body as a terrain where we can alleviate kind of any obstacles to cure, obstacles to healing. And the more we do that, actually, the healthier we become and we optimize wellness.
Yeah, that's wonderful, because our what we call conventional medicine is really like a factory system to me. It's like we bin you into this category so we know what pills to throw at you, and it's kind of designed for a mass society. And from what you're describing is really more natural, the way that we would work in nature. We would try to find that solutions are in nature, and people live for how many thousands of years before we know.
Exactly, Mike. And I think, what we're seeing right now across the globe is that most of our systems are set up more as a sick care system than a health care system. We are looking at helping people out when they are already in crisis mode, when there have not been any lifestyle interventions, when people are suffering from a multitude of different symptoms and ailments that are associated with toxicity and chronic disease, and unfortunately have gotten to the point where things are out of control before they're actually receiving any kind of intervention. And that even if you're kind of going for visits with doctors and specialists, a lot of times there's just not enough time to get to the bottom of what's really going on. And so you may be receiving a medication or a procedure as an intervention, but that medication or procedure may then down the line cause further issues, side effects, other what we refer to now as comorbidities, which are things that can predispose us to other chronic illness. So in naturopathic medicine, we are trained as diagnosticians, so we do know how to look at the body using all the laboratory work and things like this to diagnose illness. We are supporting treating that, however, as I mentioned in the beginning, by using the least invasive things first and collaborating with other specialists as needed. Now, you mentioned in the beginning, it's true, it's only a little more than half the states where naturopathic medicine is licensed as primary care. So we are looking toward the goal of having naturopathic medicine really recognized as the proper primary care service that it's able to provide in all the states in the United States, because we're ready, willing, and eager to help out in this kind of epidemic that we're seeing of chronic disease. And many of these illnesses are preventable and even reversible that we're seeing among the population, especially when it comes to just simple things like nutrition and illnesses that come from poor nutrition, obesity, and metabolic syndrome, these kinds of things.
And as you mentioned, one of your primary roles is to educate, because that's really what a doctor is supposed to do, right? Isn't that the fundamental
Yes.
meaning?
Yes, and for me personally, I'll share a little bit that, as many people who when I was in my studies learning about naturopathic medicine, I came kind of late in the game to even knowing about what it really was. And it appealed to me so much because I feel that it really bridges the gap between some of these alternative modalities and conventional medicine into a new paradigm where we're looking at taking from the best of all of these different branches of medicine and putting it together in honor of the patient as a whole person. I, went through the experience of losing a loved one when I was fairly young, and seeing the fact that the different specialties, while they were important in this particular case, there was a lot of contraindications going on between the different types of specialties. Let's say a certain medication was causing a problem for another organ system in the body, and what was missing was someone to kind of jump in on that team from a collaborative angle and look at the whole person. And so it is really, really interesting to then think about, when we're getting into caring for ourselves and our families, taking on this idea of doctor as teacher really means that health empowerment comes from really teaching people what's out there and what is good and how to get the best out of all the different branches of medicine. And with doctor as teacher, education means that whatever your choice is, it is your choice, and we honor your choice, but we want that choice to be fully educated and fully empowered, not coming from a, well, don't try this because we don't know much about it, so therefore we're afraid of it, or that stuff is just I don't know, it probably doesn't work, this, that, the other. We want to really teach people what's available so that we can kind of intervene before the suffering becomes too severe. And there are so many things that are basic and simple that can be done for health and wellness that start in your lifestyle at home, that will even keep you from needing not only, let's say, 10 to 15 toxic medications down the line, but even so many different supplements and all these things that cost money, that's kind of confusing to a consumer.
Yeah, it's a big problem, and it's it's all about self-responsibility at some level. Our system is so complex, and we all have this little narrow jobs, most of us, or careers, and it's too complex for us to be experts in everything. But we're seeing the results of that. We're just kind of at the mercy of whatever system goes off the rails. And I tell people, if you think about where you work or the politics of your job and how people act, do you really think the medical system is any different than this or any other system?
Absolutely. Just, there's issues everywhere. And I think that what, is most important for all of us in terms of what's going to determine how happy we feel and how successful we are in relationships and in terms of our health and everything we want out of this life that we're living, is recognizing that the power comes from within. That the more we work on educating ourselves, what is out there, and not just relying on external systems to come up with the answer, then we can literally become healthier and happier people. So in naturopathic medicine, as I mentioned, we follow these guiding principles. There's a therapeutic order. It basically is talking about first establishing the foundation of health, and then we really want to stimulate the body's self-healing mechanism. It's not something that's talked about very often, but you can see just the simple example that, you know, if you get a cut on or a bruise, you see things come in onto the surface of the skin that actually will start to heal that wound naturally. Now, of course, we have some things we use to facilitate that healing process, but essentially what it is the body knows through the circulatory system how to stimulate the healing process. And we as naturopathic doctors are really trying to facilitate that. And sometimes that means taking a step back, really listening to the words of the patient, the story of the patient, the history of the patient, but also looking for other clues from the body to guide us in terms of what it really needs in order to heal. You know, we're more facilitators. So that then leads us to kind of supporting and restoring any areas that are weak. When a patient comes in for naturopathic treatment, let's say they're talking about a lot of signs and symptoms that seem like it's all over the place, it's involving multiple systems. We may, for example, be looking then to the gut. I do specialize a lot in gut health, and I do a lot of mental health. So one of my specialties is the gut-brain axis. We can see, let's say, a person suffering from anxiety or depression may be low in serotonin because 95% of serotonin is produced in the gut. So if the gut is a weak system, before we go and prescribe some medication, we may be looking at healing the gut and enhancing the body's natural ability to support and balance mood, sleep, these weakened systems before we intervene at the next level. So, you know, then we're going to look at symptom control in terms of certain modalities or natural therapeutics that can be given to reduce a symptom, let's say knee pain or a headache. I, as you mentioned, am a licensed acupuncturist. So if someone comes in acute pain, I'm going to give them a treatment that's going to support reducing that pain. But simultaneously, we're going to look, what is the root cause? You know, a trauma, a fall, that's something easy to determine. If it's more inflammatory because there's an underlying chronic illness, or again, I mentioned the gut, an issue there, then we have to do a little more detective work as we support symptom control. We're also looking from the inside out. And then, you know, after we've done all those things, it's kind of like a pyramid. You know, you start at the foundation. What are the determinants of health? Then you go into stimulating self-healing through proper sleep, through proper food and nutrition, through hydration, through eliminating any stressors that can be eliminated. Once you've done all those things, then you'll go to, you know, some of the more, let's say, synthetic treatment options like medications. And then lastly, you know, the more serious interventions if and when needed. You know, certainly if there's something acute or we're looking at emergency medicine, you know how to refer and get what's done. You know, I've said it's like you get hurt, you need stitches, you go, you get those stitches, then we work on the rest. But that's what it is. And so, you know, in conventional medicine, we're seeing a lot of suppression of pathology. Something happens and you're given a pill before you're maybe even given enough time to tell the full story. And while sometimes those things may be needed as an intervention, suppression down the line usually does lead to more side effects and more toxicity. So we hope to keep that kind of as a last resort rather than a first arm of treatment.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I mean, just thinking about the system we're in, it's really, it's like being stampeded. You know, we're in a herd. And so when you're in a herd, you're just going to take the lowest common denominator approach. And that's what we've seen the last 2 years. We've grossly oversimplified at best, you could say, what's going on.
Yeah.
We've hidden the causes, which are toxicities, which are all
Right.
these stressors. And then on top of that, you just stampede everybody in fear. And that's just going to multiple times magnify
Yeah.
any, and then now everybody thinks you're going to die when they get a cold, you know. So
Well, exactly. And fear does lead to paralysis and overwhelm. You know, there's the healthy version of fear, which says, you know, if I stick my hand in that hot water and I get burned, I might have some natural fear about putting my hand in hot water again. That's important. You know, fear is useful. But when we're living in a vibratory state of fear, or we're really just being inundated with fear about what's out there, it does lead us to a much more paralyzed state of being, and will only enhance the stress. It negatively affects the immune system and the autonomic nervous system, which is governing our stress response. We want to be in fight or flight sometimes if we need to fight or flee. And then we really want to get into the rest, the digest, the restore, because this is where the healing happens. And you did mention something very important, you know, in both naturopathic and Chinese medicine, we use nature as a guide. And right now we are very cut off from nature in terms of how it does heal. And I think it's an interesting time and place to talk about the SolaraGem as well, because you know, nature cure, really the root of biologic medicine and naturopathic medicine came from a group of doctors that were using water and sunlight and exercise and things like this outdoors to stimulate, again, this body's natural ability to heal itself. There's an ancient Chinese saying that I love to bring into my teachings, which is, where there is movement, there is no pain. Where there is no movement, there is pain. And so, you know, the more we move and we promote the natural flow of things, like the flow of a river in nature, you know, our bodies are the same. We have blood vessels and lymphatic vessels. The more things are able to move and we are able to move and continue going forward, you know, the less stagnation, the less infection, the less pain and inflammatory processes we're going to have. So nature cure is basically sunlight, it's the earth, it's the ocean, it's the water, it's alternating temperatures of hot and cold. You know, you'd have these doctors where it was really more like a spa, where you'd go through different levels of temperature, and that facilitates the circulatory system. And then through kind of harnessing a fever or sweating, you're able to release pathogens and even heal very serious diseases. Now we're looking at, you know, where technology is merging with nature cure. We can see frequency-based medicines like what you see with SolaraGem and some of these other devices that are using energetic healing, sound, and light to essentially penetrate deeply into the water that our bodies are made up of, to again facilitate that circulatory flow and detoxification. And, you know, even Einstein and Tesla did mention that the future of medicine is frequency. So I think it's so interesting to see how different companies and different you know, engineers, people are coming together to use the best of technology to very simply, gently, and in a non-invasive way facilitate the healing process.
yeah, it's quite profound, and the fact that really all of life is frequency. Everything,
Right.
even our digestive system, is operating at a very low frequency, but it's actually measuring frequencies from the food, right? I mean, it's
Yeah, exactly. You know, and I think frequencies, it's this terminology can, I think, be confusing for people, because we think of energy and what does it really mean, and frequency, you know, there are wavelengths coming from the sun, you know, to us, and from the ocean we have these negative ion charges that are coming off of the ocean and into the air. And essentially, I like to simplify things because we all live somewhere. You know, the body is pipes and electricity, and inside the water, you know, there are negatively and positively charged ions that are floating around. That's an electrochemical exchange. So this is what we're really talking about when we're talking about energy and frequency. It's not more of this esoteric concept. It's actually a very real biochemical and physiologic thing that's happening. You know, what we breathe in oxygen, we exhale carbon dioxide. There's an exchange going on inside our physiology. We're using minerals to create all of the pathways of energy and detoxification in our system. And this is where some of these frequencies that we receive from the external environment are helping our cells to literally produce energy, ATP, and to detoxify and to create all the exchanges that we need to generate new cells that make up our tissues, which is essentially what we focus on in health and healing from a more curative standpoint, right? It's like, I think we overemphasize in modern science and medicine the fact that everything's breaking down as we age. Everything's getting worse, everything's breaking down, there's all this chronic illness. Well, we also are actually rebuilding and restoring and creating new cells that make new tissues with these practices that we can do at home and literally every night when we go to sleep at night, which is why some of these basic lifestyle things that we maybe kind of, again, underemphasize are so important for health and healing. We mentioned fear. When you're in a fear state and your nervous system is overwhelmed, we're not getting good rest and we're not getting into that parasympathetic mode of the nervous system, which actually really promotes that health, healing, and restoration.
Yeah, and really, it's funny because the breakdown is just as important as the buildup. I mean, we
Yes,
are complete. That's a cycle. Again,
it's
it's
a
another.
cycle. Yeah. You don't have one without the other. So this is where I think Chinese medicine is so beautiful. They talk about each of the organ systems is connected to a season in nature. And to use the example of the lung, I was just speaking about the breathing process. The lung is connected to the large intestine in Chinese medicine, and it's representative of the season of fall. So, what do we see in fall, especially if you're living in the New England areas where I grew up, and then now in New York, is that, right before the leaves fall off the trees, they turn these beautiful yellow, orange, bright red colors, which is also representative from an emotional standpoint of grieving and honoring what's about to pass before we let it go. And where the cycle comes in, of course, is like the ritual of celebrating what's about to die is the beautiful colors. That would be the grieving. The letting go is it drops to the ground. And when it drops to the ground, it's providing nourishment and nutrients, literally nitrogenous, right into the soil so that we can have then more trees, right? So the breakdown is not the scary thing that we all think. It's actually that process of decay, then detoxification that then allows for more regeneration. When we take in food, we have to break it down, assimilate it, take the vitamins and minerals, and then we have to excrete the waste so that we can take in more. So as you said, the more we connect with that cyclical process, I even do, in the mental health work that I do, I talk a lot about the emotions or weather patterns. They're meant to be here. They're also meant to change, just like pain is meant to move. We get symptoms, but, they're meant to move. Health is not symptom free. Health is how we move through life optimally in a balanced state and how well our symptoms kind of come and go and heal as we age without putting us in a more state of chronic degeneration and disease.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And even the fractal nature, because our lungs and our large intestine also have trees inside them in
Exactly.
the pattern, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Which is the beauty of another, thing we study in naturopathic medicine, of course, is botanical medicine, herbs, and, which have such a wonderful place to play in gut health and the microbiome. And you mentioned respiratory. And it's a really interesting thing that there's a concept called plant signatures, where you're able to just observe, again, reconnecting like the sort of more ancient ones did through the practices of indigenous medicine with observing what the plant even looks like, can help us understand what it might be useful for in our body. You see those plants that are most useful for the lungs happen to actually look more like bronchioles. It's a beautiful, nature is wise. And again, that takes us back to this kind of these guiding principles. The therapeutic order of naturopathic medicine is really to start with that as the foundation, that nature has the wisdom. We want to establish that foundation for optimal health rather than just saying, oh, you have a symptom, let's just get rid of it. Because unfortunately, even these things that we often try to do to get rid of it ends up not getting rid of it, sometimes exacerbating it, and then down the line causing more trouble. So we want to take a much more balanced approach. We want a collaborative system of healthcare. We want a new paradigm where we're actually able to take the best of what's out there and, not be exclusionary, but actually inclusive in terms of knowing when is the right time to refer to a specialist, when do you need a certain type of an intervention, but not to kind of force these interventions on people without really getting to the root cause of what's going on for them.
No, and it's so important, and that's I happened to stumble across that therapeutic order because I was looking to see, is there something like this out here?
Yeah,
Because I know when I work with people with SolaraGem, and even a lot of practitioners don't understand this, because
right.
again, we have to start from this. We all have to unlearn, and we have to break out of, again, that destructive cycle. All the stuff we learn has to be destroyed and
Right.
rebuilt at a higher level.
Yep.
So I think with the SolaraGem, we're talking about, it's such a foundational frequency, like your plant signatures you talk about. Those are a little more current and live because we're pulling them off a tree right when they're growing or whatever. But the stones have been in the ground for millions,
Yeah.
billions of years, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
So how do
And
you
not
kind of
just
see it all playing in like that? Yeah. How do you?
yeah, and many of these things, date back to ancient civilizations, and it's written, what the medicinal properties of all of these different things are, like the stones, and what herbs were useful for what, and many of these things have just they're standing the test of time. They still work, they're still effective, and we may be drawn to things like you were drawn to learning about the therapeutic order. I mean, I kind of stumbled upon naturopathic medicine as well. I'm not going to say by accident, because of course everything happens for a reason, but I did not know about it, when I was younger. And in my opinion, it's like, why doesn't everybody know about it? And why doesn't everybody try acupuncture first for pain before they go for something else? So learning about the frequencies, the medicinal aspects of the things that are literally right in our yard, in nature, is so helpful. And I can share, I mean, I've traveled a lot. I was a Peace Corps volunteer. I lived in South America for a few years. And while I was there, it was just wonderful to see that in a place where, I was in a pretty rural environment, most of the local people there knew what all the herbs were in the backyard and how to put them into the tea, whether it was for literally like a parasite type of treatment, just a general digestive, something good for the lungs. And, most of us would look at that and say those are weeds. And it was actual medicine. Same thing with the gemstones. And I think we're drawn to them, certainly. I mean, in jewelry, we pick them up and we know they are beautiful and they feel good. But really understanding the different medicinal aspects of what they can do, and sending the frequency, wave and sound and light through the stone to literally amplify the healing effect, is how we see technology kind of merging with nature cure in such a way that we can make these things, available to us in our home.
Yeah, and I love the fact too that you're working with the mental health as well as the physical, because you can't separate the two. And that's kind of the beauty of the Chinese medicine, because if you look at these different patterns, they lump emotions and physical. We
Yeah.
tend to think there's the emotional body, the physical body. No, they're not separate at all.
No, they are not separate. Nothing in the body is separate. And, through acupuncture, you do start to see that, let's say there's a scar, a physical scar somewhere in the body, the pain could be very high upstream or downstream. Oftentimes, if I'm treating the knee, perhaps I might start at the foot or up high with my first needle before I go somewhere else. The entire body is a circulatory system that is flowing all throughout. And the mind and the body is such an interesting kind of thing that we're hearing a lot about and talking a lot about, but science is catching up with what a lot of these ancient traditions and what I think naturopathic medicine knew, which is that our thoughts are things, and our cells are eavesdropping on the conversation, and we are receiving the frequency of our mindset and our attitude all day, every day. And so, there's a placebo effect, which is, I believe I'm going to get better, and therefore I do, even though I took a sugar pill. There's also a nocebo effect, which is equally as powerful. In the mental health work I do, I think almost sometimes it's even more powerful, because it's harder to break the habit. The nocebo effect is, if I don't believe it's going to help me, then it won't, and nothing ever has, so nothing ever will. And aside from the therapeutic order we were talking about and the principles of Chinese medicine and naturopathic medicine, there's a man called Constantine Herring. He had developed a law of cure that he said was observable, which is sort of like a timeline. If you're dealing with something chronic, then it's going to take X amount of months for your body to heal just naturally in terms of the pace. He also observed that pain kind of moves down and out throughout the body, and healing occurs from the inside out and from the top down, also from the head down, meaning the first step is to believe that you're going to be well and to get better, and if you don't, then to at least start thinking about beginning to believe that you're going to get better.
Well, belief is a technology. There's an author, James True, I really learned a lot from, kind of an out there guy, but he talks about belief technology. And if you think about it, you go to the doctor, and that doctor is wearing a white coat,
right?
And he's very professional looking, there was a book years ago I read in college where the waiting room was like the principal's office.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you're quiet because you're worried that, you don't want to back talk the principal. You're
right.
already in trouble because you're at the principal's office. So this creates, and I remember one time I had some, like an ingrown toenail, and I went to the podiatrist, and the guy had a ponytail.
Yeah.
And I just had a real bad feeling that he was going to screw it up. And this was about 10, 12 years ago. And it's like, I worked in technology with a guy with a ponytail who was great. He could do all kind of stuff. I had no problem at all with ponytails, but something about a male doctor with a ponytail to me felt sloppy, not
sending a signal,
kind of loosey-goosey. And I had to go back, get the surgery redone, and that doctor got transferred to the office because he was screwing things up. But it was interesting how that belief.
Well, your perception from the moment you walk into a given environment. And so this is a concept now that's emerging in genetics and health, which is the idea that, the epigenetics is different than the genetics, which is the environment we put ourselves into has a lot to do with whether or not we go down a path toward greater health, or we go down the path toward disease and degeneration. And really that first thought, which is the perception of the environment, you mentioned the white coat, hence the term white coat hypertension. Some people are so nervous their blood pressure is rising the minute they see the coat, and because they think they're in trouble, or they're going to mess up the test, or they did something wrong, and that's coming from that place of a little bit of fear and anxiety. And so putting ourselves in a healing environment, starting with our thoughts and our perception, is very, very powerful in terms of our overall ability to heal. And I think that is really where SolaraGem and spending time in nature, hydrotherapy, which is different types of water things for health, that is where that stuff has such a profound effect. Because if you're putting yourself in a pleasant environment, an uplifting environment, as often as you can, given the challenges we face in modern society, then you're absolutely taking a step in the right direction in terms of facilitating the body's ability to heal itself. When everything around and surrounding is negative and stressful, and that perception is unhappy and unpleasant, and too much stress, too many bells and emails coming, and all of this kind of thing all the time, then essentially what it is doing is it's really kind of creating an extra layer, an extra obstacle to cure and healing. So the more often you do spend time in the natural environment, you take advantage of some of these nice tools that we have at home that you can do that are so easy, the better you're doing in terms of your ability to stay well, prevent illness, but also optimize health down the line.
And especially that healing environment, like the polyvagal theory is one
Right.
that found very profound. And they talk about, if you look at a hospital, 180 degrees from the way healing should be done in every way.
Yeah.
Because it's, maybe you could talk about that briefly, but it's not thinking that we're safe. It's our body at this reptilian level feeling safe. It has nothing to do with this. This is after the fact, right?
Right. No, you're right. It's exactly that. It's the nervous system. And so in the more chaotic time that we're in, it's like I will talk with patients about more simple techniques, and I do believe this is where frequency plays a big role, because frequencies, for example, they talk a lot now. You can even find, if you just are on the internet, looking through different sources, you may find different Hertz frequencies, and they talk about the different states the mind is and body is able to get into when you are doing meditation. For example, I know like Navy SEALs and things like this get themselves into a state of a certain brain wavelength that is putting you in a different mode. And like you say, it's not the mind saying, oh, I must relax, and then you relax. It's the nervous system and the vagus nerve, very specifically, getting yourself into an autonomic state of the deeper rest and digest. And so certain frequencies will facilitate that. You can listen to sounds, you can receive frequencies through the environment, through using, I think, the gemstone therapy as well, that will put the body in a state where before you know it, things have shifted, and then your mind says, oh wow, I feel more relaxed. I'll put things on just ambiently in the environment when I'm doing my housework, or I'm washing the dishes or cleaning up, or just doing some simple things where you're listening to some more balancing frequencies that are, there's the alpha, the beta, the theta, different brain wavelengths, and you see the difference, especially if you're waking up or you're just in the middle of a day where there was a lot of stress, and that's kind of where you're coming from. Rather than trying to talk yourself out of the stress, a much better way is just to change the frequency and start receiving the frequency, and then your body gets calm. Something as simple as a castor oil pack, for example, which is like an old school naturopathic thing that we talk about, putting this castor on a pack and then putting it on your belly, it gets you into the parasympathetic mode, that side of the nervous system that's getting you into that deep dive of the healing, the rest, and the digest. So yes, meditation can do, listening to the frequencies can do it, receiving a treatment of some kind can do it. And you do want to spend time in that state. And you mentioned the most important piece, which is it's not an intellectual thing. It's not a mental thing. We can tell ourselves to calm down, and maybe sometimes that works. But it's much nicer if the body can get us there, and then the mind says, oh, this is good. This feels right.
And life is really consciousness. The more conscious we are, the more alive we are.
Absolutely.
The more our body feels and experiences, the more we're living.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. The more, and the consciousness is, there's a lot of talk about, breaking habits and changing neuronal pathways and things like this when it comes to negative thought or all the things that we're doing that are, detrimental to our health. And really the key, everybody is saying, no matter who you're listening to, is mindfulness. And mindfulness is this active consciousness. And this active consciousness comes from self-care and really spending time to just recognize where we are in time and space, to take a pause and to see what we need. And it is certainly undervalued in modern society because we're just very focused on what we produce, what we do, how much we have on the calendar and what's coming next and the deadlines and this, that, the other. And, while that's all well and good, the other side of it needs to be embraced, which is that rest is productive, and receiving good feelings from the external world will guide you on that path of healing. And the more conscious we are, the more we care for ourselves, the better we feel, then the better we're able to care for others. And that extends all the way out, hopefully, to the environment and the planet as well.
Yeah, and what I've noticed with things like the SolaraGem, and certainly like things like sounds and meditation, but since I use the SolaraGems probably the most of anything, is that it's working at so many different levels of conscious awareness, and it's like it's just creating a beacon. It's
Yes.
a crystal is locks into a frequency that's been around forever, and it has this feeling of, it creates kind of a backdrop, just like when you light a painting in the museum. If you don't light it
Absolutely.
properly, it doesn't look like anything. But all of a sudden,
Yep.
you light it the right way, and everything shows up. And that's
Yep.
to me kind of what the SolaraGem does: is
Yeah.
lights up where things will start to become into your awareness, and you start to
Mhm.
see these contradictions and these things that
Yeah.
are not making you happy.
Absolutely. And I think just a simple example for the listeners is, we know what happens when we turn up the dial on the radio and the amplifier, and the music comes out and it reaches a much broader audience, with SolaraGem and taking the light and the technology that you're able to kind of beam through the crystal. You are sending a greater amplified signal out, to the room, to the person, so that they're able to really receive on a deeper level the frequency of the medicinal quality of that gemstone. Just like when we're walking by the ocean and the breeze comes and the sun is shining, we feel that greater sense of uplifting and detoxification and purification from the salt and the minerals that are in the ocean.
Yeah, and each level of our body is going to receive something different from one of these
Exactly.
frequencies. Just like if you and I were at a concert, you might be crying
Right.
at one song and I might think it's cheesy,
Yeah,
because it hits you
exactly.
and it doesn't hit me.
That's the beauty of it, right? And then you start to get drawn to what you need because your constitution is a little different than mine, and your life history and what you've been through emotionally and all that is different. And that's the beauty of what we have in the natural world and of art and of music, that we're going to actually receive the message that we need. And this goes right back, takes us full circle to that therapeutic order, which is, the foundation of the pyramid is identifying the determinants of health for a given person. And that might be a little different than the next person that walks in. So it's beautiful to talk with you about this. And I think that, the SolaraGem, the crystal light therapy, it just fits so perfectly with nature cure. It's taking modern science and technology and it's putting it right back to nature cure, which is what we need more of in medicine. It's what we need more of in our lives, and certainly the planet needs it.
No, it's wonderful. And I appreciate all you've been doing with it. And I always love to hear your stories and the things you're seeing with it. And I did have another question, if it's not off track, but it's a lot of times our clients, or you have more clients than I do. I don't work with people directly a lot, more than demonstrations and things. But how many times do clients take themselves off track in their healing? Like, oh, this doesn't work anymore, just because they don't seem to feel it the same way. And
Sure.
I see people really lock themselves out of so many solutions. Have you got
Mhm.
a good answer for that, or a
Oh,
good?
absolutely. I think it's a journey, and I think that timing matters, and there are layers in healing. I think that I look at it like fog, steaming off the horizon, and then it's going to produce more fog. Everything is cyclical, and there are layers. So there's going to be a time and a place where a person is going to put down the treatment too soon because they're feeling frustrated, or they're not ready, or they've been through a lot, and it's just not lining up. And so there's essentially a permission to kind of come and go. And there is that feeling that we are teachers, we are guides, we are facilitators, and we're not here to force anything. That the most profound healing does happen when you're really lined up and you're ready to kind of release something and move to the next level. I often will describe it to patients like, you're at the base of the mountain and you're climbing up to the peak, and you get that 360 view and the sun is shining and you see the snow-capped peaks and everything. Well, as you're going up, there's going to be rainstorms, and you're going to need to sometimes just like take shelter. And then there are going to be moments where you need to stop and just turn your head back and take a look at how far you've actually come in order to then get to the next step. So, patience and self-love is important for a patient, and for doctors, recognizing that if people will come and go, and they'll kind of, yes, there will be blocks, and you can often see them. We all as human beings have blind spots too, and it's very profound when you actually learn what a blind spot is and then you overcome it. But if a person's not really ready, there's an art and a science. So I would say it happens quite frequently because it's within our human nature. It is something that we do experience, but it's in no way, is going to be such an obstacle that we can't overcome it.
No, it's just something to really be aware of, how our
Absolutely.
mind is a mechanism, and it's designed to
Yeah,
work in a specific way, and we don't understand it and we identify with it, but it's
right,
not us at all.
right.
And there's this thing that people can take themselves out of a course of healing
Yes.
because of this expectation that I should see this certain progress.
Absolutely. The expectation, is important. There's couple sayings about expectation, and one of them is it often leads to disappointment. But what you want to do, a healthy expectation, is just to really be gentle with yourself and to recognize that healing is a process. It is a journey. You do have to take stock in what you've already accomplished and continue to revisit that and know where you are. And sometimes the symptom we want to get rid of the most is not the first thing to disappear. So it's my job to say, hey, but actually last time you said you couldn't sleep at all, and now you're sleeping every night. So that's an improvement, and we have to track that. And yes, we do, as human beings, we get in our own way very often. But the more we spend time kind of checking in with this process, and we do take this gentle approach, and we recognize that the mind is a really powerful thing. And one thing I really like to clarify with people is, just because the mind counts and it matters doesn't automatically make a negative thing your fault. There's too much blame, shame, guilt, all that out there. So what it is it's to empower. Again, I mentioned doctor as teacher and health empowerment is recognizing that your mind is powerful means, how can I use it as my ally and not my enemy? Which means if I'm catching myself going down a negative trail or sabotaging, then the first thing to do is actually just recognize the awareness of it. Even if I'm not ready to shift that yet, if I'm aware and I see myself doing it, then I'm that much more likely the next time to let my guard down and say, hey, okay, the way I've been doing things hasn't been working. I do need to welcome a shift there.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned expectation too. Is I think it was Dan Gilbert. I heard Dr. Alex Lloyd talking about this. There was a study done, and maybe it was Dan Gilbert wrote this, or I don't know if it's his study, but every expectation leads to stress, whether it's an
Right.
expectation of
Yeah.
something good or bad. They all lead to
Exactly.
stress.
Yeah, yeah. So what's more interesting than expectation is just to kind of have just that sort of neutral, optimistic, but open mind to receiving that good can come and that healing can happen, and to kind of let some of that expectation down. I'll often use that example of kind of, we want to be a bird and we want to fly above the situation and kind of separate ourselves from the ground level of what we're really dealing with, and just take a moment to observe where we are a little more neutrally. And then we can let go of some of the pressure, some of the stress of the expectation, and then just allow our needs in the moment and over time to kind of guide us to what's going to happen with our healing. I'm tired, well, I need to sleep. I'm thirsty, I need to have some water. That sounds really simple, but throughout most of the day, our feelings of frustration are guiding us down the wrong path, indulging in cravings and all kinds of other things, rather than checking in with what we really need. So
Yeah, and I want to put a link to that article about the therapeutic order, because I
yes,
think it's well worth it for people to
thank
look at that and realize that healing is really about being at the base of that foundation,
you.
and all of
Exactly.
our work should lead to that. All of our self work, we have to do things higher up, and that's
Yep.
fine.
Right.
But
And truly, the more we embrace that, it's actually simpler and easier than the other way. Even though we've been trained to think, oh, there's a pill for everything, or there's a quick fix. When we spend time on the base of the pyramid, we get healthier, happier, and it becomes a much easier, simpler, and even more affordable way to go about doing things. Because the more you are there, the less you have to make all these appointments and run out for all of this kind of, like we were speaking about at the beginning, the more sick care type stuff. So So absolutely, I think it's a really nice thing to provide that information. It's part of the naturopathic medical tradition, so I'm happy to have it. It's really been guiding the way that I work with patients on a one-on-one basis, and it's just a pleasure always to connect with you and to talk with you about how all these things fit in and the future of medicine. I think we're building it here together. So thank you for talking with me today, and we're gonna share this with the NYMP and with all kinds of people, and I hope that many people will benefit from learning more about naturopathic medicine and SolaraGem.
Well, thank you for all you're doing, for your time, and just you're a big inspiration to me, and I appreciate all your
Thank you,
support
Mike.
through
Oh,
developing the
absolutely.
SolaraGem and everything. And tell people where to get a hold of you, or however you want them, if they want to connect with you, or what they need to know for the whatever
Absolutely.
you're doing.
Yes. Yes. So I have a website, drtiatrivisonno.com. That's a more personal website that's kind of connected to the different clinics I'm working at. I'm also at transformationalhealing.me. That is one practice in Glen Head. There's also rejuve-health.com. That's in East Hampton. But if you go to the drtiatrivisonno.com, it'll lead you to the other two. I'm at two separate clinics, and nyanp.org is the New York Association of Naturopathic Physicians, where I'm currently the president, and you will see some information there as well. So I'm really excited to join you today. Happy for the opportunity and looking forward to all this good work, more collaboration in the future.